All right. So we've already kind of done introductions and kind of going around, but I do want to thank everybody for coming out. My name is Darren Morgan. I'm the Executive Director of Arkansas Commitment. I also had the pleasure of serving as this year's State and Area Initiatives Chair for Arkansas SACAC. Um, Thank you all for coming. I know this is like our busy time of the year. People on my side of the desk are dealing with probably last minute letter of recommendation requests and helping their students put the final touches on their applications. And people on the college side are getting bombarded with applications right now. So I'm going to value your time. We're going to go ahead and speed through it. But before I do, I did want to give everyone else that was on the board for Arkansas SACAC a chance just to let people put a face to an email address. So I know we have Matthew on, I see Trisha, Phil. If you're a member of the Arkansas board, would you mind just saying your name, what school you work for, and what capacity you serve SACAC? And anybody who wants to volunteer to go first? It's like school, I'm gonna have to call on somebody.
I don't know if I'm technically on the board, but I think I'm going to talk with you in a little bit about the Arkansas State Drive-In. I'm Matthew Foster. I'm working in concert with Whitney Smotherman from Mount, and we're working on the drive-in. I'm at Little Rock Christian, and this is my 4th year with SACAC.
Appreciate it, Matthew. Is anyone else on? All right, if not, appreciate that, Matthew. I'll go ahead and get started then. All right, so if you are a new member or a non-member of SACAC, let me give you guys a quick introduction to the program. So we are a regional affiliate of the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. In addition to Arkansas, members are located in 8 other states and in the Caribbean. Some of our organization priorities are to provide accessible professional development opportunities and services to all current and potential members, to develop and enhance existing state and area-based initiatives, to engage members and cultivate leadership to various activities with the association. So whether you want to expand your network on a regional level or receive access to resources, please let SACAC be your go-to one-stop shop for everything you need as far as college admissions goes. On this slide, we just have a few of the premier activities and organizations that we have and programs that we have to really allow students and staff to get engaged. Our premier one is the annual conference. This is a 3-day conference. This is our flagship professional development event. This academic year's conference will be in Orlando, Florida from April 3rd to April 5th. So right after our spring break, if you can swing it, you'll basically get 2 vacations. So I highly recommend it, not just for the sunshine, but also for the professional development. It's a great event. I actually met Wendell Scales there, one of my good friends. It's really amazing for networking, for just getting connected with other professionals. They have everything there from financial aid to workshops to admissions ethics to best practices to even wellness and athletic programs. So if you can go, I highly recommend it. Another way to get involved is through the virtual book clubs. Starbeth Fleming, going to hear from her in a little bit, is actually the DEI co-chair for SACAC. And they've been doing some great work at Starbeth and Ashley Armato, really finding books that helps professionals see our students' experience from different lenses. Some of the books that they've picked have been Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent, and was it Abraham Jack's The Privileged Poor. 2 really, really great books that allow educators to really see our students' experience from a social, economic, and cultural perspective that we normally don't see. Sometimes it kind of reveals that hidden caste system that, you know, is kind of behind the scenes. It's so easy to forget about sometimes unless you really brush up on it. So really great experiences. I've sat on a couple of those and it was really amazing just to talk to other educators and learn their experiences, their thoughts and how their students are kind of going through and navigating through their high school and college experience. And one of the last ones I'll talk about is the Sweet Tea College Tour. It's a great way to learn about other colleges in the region. It's basically a 5-day road trip with other colleagues I haven't been on it, but I heard it's a lot of fun. But anytime you get admissions counselors and college counselors in the same room, especially on a bus, it's always going to be a good time. This year's tour is going to be in Louisiana and Mississippi, states that are right in our backyard that a lot of our students are already applying in. So it would be great to just kind of help gain familiarity with other schools in the region. On a more local level, SACAC helps its members through programs like legislative days and drive-in workshops. I know, Matthew, you said you're going to talk about it. Would you mind hopping in now and just talking about the drive-ins?
Sure. Just a quick promo and save the date. Arkansas will be having their drive-in workshop on February 3rd of 2022. So go ahead and mark that down. We're lining up some great speakers for that. We'll have 3 sessions. We'll talk about access and being a culturally, I'll be able to say that by February 3rd, responsive college counselor. We'll also talk about some best practices, and we'll also address some changes coming up with something like the FAFSA. So Whitney Smotherman from Mount is leading that, along with the supervision of the fantastic Corey Bailey. And I am along for the ride and the fun. So I hope to see all of you there. We had a great attendance last year and look to increase that even more.
Appreciate it. And I think Jeremy is on. Wendell, if you're on as well. I was trying to flip through the pictures at the top. Would you all mind speaking about legislative days if you're on? And if not, we'll keep going.
Oh, Darren, I'm here. I was just having trouble with my Zoom.
Oh, appreciate it, Jeremy.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for giving us a moment just to talk about what we're planning to do. I did connect with Wendell earlier, and I know he's planning to join, so I hope he'll pop in as well. We're new co-chairs of the legislative issues for Arkansas, and so we have been spending the fall trying to get together programming for later in the spring. We're planning to announce what we'll be doing and the exact dates in April when we'll be getting together to talk about legislative issues. We're hoping to do an in-person portion of the program as well as a remote option for people who can't travel right now. Really looking at issues that affect certain regions of the state that have historically been under sorry about that, having some trouble with my audio setup.
You're good.
But areas of the state that have been under-supported, and also looking at state aid policies that affect students now that so many schools have gone test optional. So that's kind of what we're planning. And hopefully, Wendell, if you're on, you can add anything you'd like to add.
I'm flipping through. I don't think he's here yet, but we'll keep an eye out for him. All right. Thank you for that, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Darren.
All right. So on a more personal level, we do have a few other ways you can get involved. You see the 4 on the screen. These are some of the most popular. Number 1 is the Mini Camp College. And these sessions really educate students about the college search process, financial aid resources, and how to make themselves more competitive in the admissions process. This program informs those in attendance about the ABCs of college admissions. The target audience for that will be students and families from underserved and underrepresented communities. So exactly what Jeremy was just speaking about. If you're interested in hosting one in 2022, anyone from the high school, college, or CBO side can host the program. Don't worry about funding for that. SACAC actually provides every mini camp with up to $1,000 stipend help with promotion, space, and other items for the event. If you do, I'll make sure I'll put the link for how to get involved in the chat so you can go ahead and register for that. Some of the other ones, the Horizon Award. So I was actually researching this one. This was actually a pretty cool one. So it gives a $1,000 scholarship to up to 5 students, high achieving, well-deserving students within our region. But the amazing part about that is also provides a $1,000 matching stipend for a counselor that the student also recommends. So it helps both the student and the counselor professional out. So if you're really interested in that, if you have a student that you think would be great for it, I'll be sure I either email that link out or put it in the chat as well. the Counselor Participation Fund. So if you would love to go to a SACAC event, not sure where you're going to get the money from that one to go, if it's just not in your budget, the Counselor Participation Fund allows for CBOs and high school counselors and educators to receive a stipend or grant to attend these events. And Extreme the Dream Grant enables members to establish and pay for special projects in the community. So if you have an idea for a special project or a passion project that's not already out there, definitely apply to the Extend the Dream Grant. All right, if you want to get more involved, our primary goal is just to connect members and non-members across the state on the local level. Me, Jeremy, and Wendell have been brainstorming ideas ranging from in-person meetups to virtual workshops, kind of similar to this one, just to try to bring people together. So regardless of what side of the desk you're on, we want to see our community grow to one where educators across the state can easily collaborate on different projects and ideas that we have. So if you have any ideas or want to shoot them at us, feel free to reach out to SACAC, that's Corey Bailey and Catherine Buck-Chastain at stateinitiatives@sacac.org, or you can email me at darren@arkansascommitment.org. All right, so next up, we have our first speaker, Dr. Teresa Flowers, a good friend of mine. And the reason why I wanted her to come on, so a few weeks ago, me, Wendell, and Jeremy were talking to a lot of educators in the area, and we learned that some of the biggest concerns for people on the high school side and the college side was the amount of burnout that our students are facing. It's just really hard getting kids motivated right now. I'm not sure if you all are seeing that, but I definitely am on my side. For a lot of people I've been talking to, we're all seeing that. So I wanted to bring in Dr. Flowers just to give us a few best practices and tips on how we can keep our students motivated throughout this pandemic. Dr. Flowers is, she's based in Little Rock, Arkansas. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. She's been in the profession for about 13 years. So a seasoned vet at mental health. So I'm gonna turn it over to her now and let her share her insight with us.
Thank you, Darren. Hello, everyone. As he said, I'm Dr. Teresa Flowers, and I'm the owner and lead therapist at Seed of Faith Counseling and Services here in Little Rock, Arkansas. And also currently adjunct professor at Euler teaching the School of Social Work. And so this subject, I worked in school settings from pre-K up to high school as a school-based therapist for about 5 years in Arkansas. I've worked in Texas and New York as well as a social worker, excuse me, working with this population. Let me give a fair warning. I got some sinus allergy issues going on, so hopefully you can hear me pretty clearly. I'm going to share my screen with you all. There we go. So I want to ask everyone to pause. That's the title of this presentation, but seriously, I want everybody to take a pause with me and do this belly breathing exercise. And further in, we'll discuss why. But one of the most basic breathing methods we have at our disposal is belly breathing. And so there are some other techniques you could try, but if you get this one down, it's easier to do some of the others. So everyone, make sure you're sitting comfortably and go ahead and place one of your hands over your belly, over your stomach, just below your rib cage. Place the other hand at the center of your chest. And I want you to breathe in deeply through your nostrils and let your first hand be pushed out by your stomach, and your chest should remain stationary. Then you'll breathe out through your lips, and you'll put them as if you're about to whistle, for those of us who can, and gently guide the hand on your stomach inwards, helping to press out the breath. So go ahead and do this with me like two more times. All right. So one of the reasons that I'm including this is one of the things we have free access to is really learning how to control our breathing. And one of the things I've learned from my work is oftentimes when people are anxious, frustrated, upset, they're not breathing, they're holding their breath. And so when we're talking about how does this relate to students' motivation and assisting them, a lot of times when our students are anxious, they're frustrated, they're concerned, they're overwhelmed, one of the free things you could teach them is just helping them learn how to breathe. In order to do that, you have to be able to do that for yourself. Many of you are probably familiar with this, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and created by Abraham Maslow in 1943. It's a theory of human motivation. One of the biggest questions I got from teachers when I worked in school settings was, how is it that we reach students and can really connect with them? One of the main ways is understanding where they are. If you have a student who doesn't have their basic needs, their biological, physiological needs met with food, sleep, water, if they don't have anywhere to live, or if they're concerned about these things, it's going to be really hard for them to be motivated to come to class and learn. It's going to be really hard for them to focus on their future if their basic needs and necessities are not met. Oftentimes we don't know these things because no one ever asks. We assume that everyone have these things and many people don't. Safety, health, and financial security is also very important. These are the main two we'll focus on because these are two of the things that COVID severely impacted for a lot of people, including if it impacts the family, it impacts the student. And so when people don't feel secure about their safety, it was a lot of fear around, can you leave the house? Where can you go? Who can you be around? I think this year more people interacted with family and friends for the holidays, but there was a lot of disconnect and isolation around that. And so having a basic understanding of this better helps us understand how we could tap into making sure we could keep students motivated to reach their goals in especially high school as well as college, but being aware of these. The other three levels to this is the friendship, intimacy, and family connections, respect, esteem, self-esteem, recognition, and strength, and then self-actualization is at the top of that list. So where someone's at their full potential in life, and it varies for each person. Each person's motivation is going to be different. I spoke to a young man who's in his freshman year of college. He told me right now his motivation is to play baseball. So he knows he has to pass all his classes. He has to do what he needs to do so he can continue to play baseball. And so, but his other needs are met. His family is safe, he's healthy, he has support, and his basic needs are met. So he can be at this point of self-actualization. Triggers for students. COVID-19, the fear of getting sick, death, changes in traditional ways of learning. We have a whole group of kids who had to go to virtual learning. This was a big change for a lot of educators as well. I know personally, my niece did kindergarten on Zoom, which was really interesting. And so there was a lot of extra work that had to be done at home to make sure she didn't get behind. We know that not all families had access to internet or computers. And while a lot of schools tried to meet this need, there was still a big gap. COVID, people getting sick. I have worked with people, children included, who've lost 10 to 20 family members or friends due to COVID. And so this really has an impact on people's psyche. And so it's a lot of fear there, a lot of uncertainty. And it's really hard to be motivated when you feel so uncertain of the future, when everything has changed. Family issues, whether that's financial, domestic violence and abuse, people moving, and things of that nature. One thing I tell parents, a lot of times I will hear them say, these kids need to mind their business. And I always tell people, whatever happens in a home is the child's business. So they are impacted by it. Whether or not a family openly discuss the issues or not, kids tend to be aware. Mental health challenges. One thing COVID has done has made more people aware of the mental health challenges that people are facing. And so if you have a student who is dealing with mental health concerns, and especially if they're not getting the services that they need, this could severely impact their ability to be motivated to go to class, finish their work, to fill out those applications, even if we know it's in their best interest for their future, making sure some of these basic needs are being met. So how we can help. A check-in with your students. I know for school counselors, your role is different. If you're doing counseling geared toward higher education versus mental health counseling. And I think this is something that a lot of parents aren't necessarily familiar with. They hear counselor, they think everybody does mental health counseling. And so if you have mental health providers at your school, collaborating with them to discuss ways in which you can assist students. But we all can do a basic check-in, a verbal check-in. And when I talk to young people, they say it doesn't matter who it is at the school. It could be someone who works in the cafeteria. It could be a janitor. It doesn't matter. Having someone just talk to them and check in with them about their life is really important. They pick up on some of the jewels that people just share. And so having someone to talk to is really, really important aspect in doing a check-in. Assisted students with setting boundaries, boundaries with themselves, with others. One of the boundaries that is really important at this time is their media intake. With social media, the news, we have more access to information than ever. As a mental health professional, I don't watch the news. I work the news. The people that I work with are the people who we tend to see on the news. So to take care of myself, I don't go home and then fill up on more of that stuff. And so last year when we had a lot of the demonstrations, the Black Lives Matter movement, and more conversations about police brutality and things of that nature, we have students who are taking all of this in, and it can add to a compound effect of stress, and it could be overwhelming. And so being aware and teaching students how to set boundaries around what they take in, setting boundaries with themselves about what's appropriate, not appropriate for them, and then teaching them how to say no to others or choosing friend groups and things of that nature are really important. Setting aside time to allow them to breathe. Sometimes when students come, I do this even in my practice with my adult clients, they'll come in and they'll ramble off a bunch of stuff, and I'll listen and I say, okay, let's take a few moments to just sit and breathe. A lot of times people need coaching. And so with our students, we have the opportunity to hold space and create space for them to do this. So giving them the room and space to breathe. Also, they learn a lot from modeling. So when we are able to do it as well, as adults, as professionals, we get overwhelmed, we get frustrated, and being able to take those moments to practice this as well is helpful. Encouraging students to build supports amongst each other. So study groups, group chats, and things of that nature can be very beneficial. A lot of times students can feel isolated and need the encouragement about, hey, have you tried this? So just some encouragement around, find some other people in your class who you relate to study with or to talk to about your concerns. Excuse me, assisting students with identifying future goals, having hope for the future. We know people are more likely to work towards something if they look forward to a goal. And some students are just stuck. They don't know what the options are anymore because things have changed and they'll never go back to how they were before. So a lot of times just being that extra support to talk to them and providing them some guidance. Some additional exercises you could utilize all based on breathing, triangle breathing, which basically it's an imagery exercise along with the breathing, but you're imagining the breath cycle with a triangle. So breathing in, holding, exhale. We know different people learn differently. So sometimes this is helpful with the visual learning of breathing and helping people learn to manage their breath. There's a lot of research that discuss the benefits of breathing and how it can help reduce stress and anxiety and things of that nature. And so if we can teach our young people how to get a control of this, it could be very beneficial for them. Square breathing, also another visual with basically visualizing, making a square as you breathe. And then breath focus is also another way. While you're doing deep breathing, you can use a picture in your mind or a word or a phrase to help you feel more relaxed. And it goes through the steps of what that looks like. I have found that this has been helpful with kiddos from 3 all the way up to my young adults that I work with who are in college. And just some additional suggestions, yoga and stretching, meditation, creating calm spaces at your school, if that's an option, being familiar with mental health resources in your area. A lot of times people think that they have to be the one, people are scared to discuss mental health or behavioral things because they think they have to be the one. And actually, you just need to be aware of the resources so you can connect people to the proper resources so they can get the assistance that they need. If someone has a mental health issue and it's not being addressed, then it doesn't go away. So being aware of these things can definitely be helpful with creating a common space at the school. I know a lot of times we do things such as ISS and things of this nature if students aren't behaving appropriately, but creating calm spaces, low lights, low music, calming music, and really allowing kids to become more aware of what's going on within their bodies can be very, very helpful. When you have someone who's in a calmer space, they're better able to think. When they're able to think about their future and think about their goals and think about the things that they want and more open to hearing from someone to have the guidance to be able to do that. All right, and I'll take any questions if anyone has them.
I think while others gather their thoughts, I do have one question as far as boundaries go. Do you have any activities or recommendations for best practices to teach kids boundaries? Because that's something that you might be able to give them while they're with us, but when they go home, that's something they'll have to do on their own. So what can we give them to take home?
I like role playing a lot because it puts them in a moment and gives the opportunity for them to see a visual of what it looks like. So I believe you should always provide some psychoeducation. It doesn't have to be super long, but just talking about what boundaries are. A great visual of boundaries is, I call it the line in the sand. This is my line in the sand. And then you give an example. So one example could be related to cell phones. If someone asks to borrow your cell phone and they take a picture, an inappropriate picture on your phone, how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with letting people hold your stuff if it can lead to a problem? And then you engage them in a conversation because it helps them to learn to think critically about what matters to them, what's important. Somebody might say, well, I don't care about that. I didn't do anything. Someone else might say, well, my parents told me I can't let people use my phone for any reason. And so going through role plays gives them some real life examples, but it also gives them the opportunity to practice setting a boundary and get comfortable with what can be uncomfortable situations. A lot of adults I know struggle with setting boundaries because they're afraid that people are going to be mad at them or not like them or not talk to them. And so helping them, young people, especially due to developmental stages, we know friendships are important. So helping them get comfortable with determining what they are and are not okay with. Role plays would probably be my best suggestion for that.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the group? All right, Dr. Flowers, thank you so much for that. I know you're swamped. I know you have another meeting right after this one, so feel free to log off or stay on for as long as you need.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for having me. You guys have a great day.
I appreciate it. All right, so I'm gonna reshare my screen. And next up, we actually have Sarbeth Fleming speaking about holistic admissions. So again, I spoke to a lot of counselors over the past really couple of weeks and months, really this school year. And besides mental health, another of the biggest things that they said they needed help on or wanted more insight was holistic admissions, especially regarding, the highly selective colleges. So Sarbeth has been in the field for, I think, about 20 years. She's currently at Emory University. Before that, she was at the Westminster School in Atlanta. And before that, she was actually my boss at Davidson College. So everything I know, I've learned from her. So I thought she would be a great person to come on and speak about holistic admissions. Sarbeth?
Thank you. And everything he's supposed to know, I told him and he just didn't pay attention.
See, that is a quick way to get booted off a Zoom call right there.
Well, I feel like I know almost everyone. And so I just want to talk a little bit about holistic admissions. And I am going to, actually, before I start, I want to put in the chat a link for SACAT's Mini Camp College, and we are rebranding to just college admissions workshops. So we have these throughout the year. They used to all be in person, but now they're virtual. And starting next year, we will start doing a hybrid, some in person, some virtual. But since they have been virtual, we pick a topic. And in fact, tomorrow night is holistic admissions. So I'm going to just give a snapshot for each of you about holistic admissions. But if you're like, this is something my students, my parents I work with, anyone can register for the Mini Camp College / college admissions workshop. And we have two wonderful presenters that will present tomorrow evening on holistic admissions. And again, that is open to any and everyone who can log into a Zoom. They just need to go to that website and register, and I will send that link out. So if you're thinking, I have students, juniors, seniors, freshmen who really need to hear about holistic admissions, please share this link with them. Okay, so I am going to get started here, and I have just added 3 screens. So let's see, to my house of 3 monitors. So y'all are seeing the one that says holistic admissions, correct? Okay, perfect. All right. I have like 3 of them. I'm like, who knows what you're seeing? So a lot of colleges use the term holistic admissions. And like Darren mentioned, I am currently at Emory University. I was at Davidson College. I worked at the United States Coast Guard Academy, Clark Atlanta University, as well as Paul Quinn, Ohio State. And actually, this is my 2nd time at Emory. So when I'm talking about holistic admissions, I'm really coming at it from a wide scope, not just Emory specific. And so I like to start with the thing that a lot of people don't know or don't talk about when they're talking about holistic admissions. It's usually back at the end of the presentations, if it's mentioned at all, right? Institutional priorities, what does that mean? And it means different things at different universities at different times of the year, right? And so one, for example, underrepresented students, and I'll talk about that in more detail, but when I was at Clark Atlanta, the same students that might be considered underrepresented at Clark Atlanta are not the same population that's underrepresented at Emory or at Davidson, right? And so when you're looking at a student, you cannot assume, oh, you're underrepresented, so this is going to be a benefit for you at all of the colleges, because it could be a benefit at some colleges and it could not be a benefit at others. So majors are very important. We have, and it depends with different majors. If you have, and Darren and I actually worked at an institution where we had endowed German language faculty members, right? And so when we were looking at applications, and if a student said, hey, I'm interested in German and I want to continue my passion to take German classes, wonderful, because we have a faculty member who is endowed who is going to teach German. And if no one is coming in taking this class, that faculty member is just chilling. And so the majors can be an institutional priority, legacies, alums. Some colleges still consider that, others don't. I was really sad when I was applying to my grad school that the college I was applying to didn't look at legacies. And I was like, this is the one time I have a legacy at this college. And they were like, yeah, we don't consider that. Still got in, so that was still cool. But not all colleges care about legacies or alums connections. And so that is something that you can't automatically think, oh, your parents graduated from this school, that college will look at it. To be very candid, I'm talking with friends, development cases. And so if it's like, oh, this parent has already donated $10 million to this museum and we want a new building over here, they may donate to our school. And so some colleges are very candid when they're saying, well, actually, most colleges aren't candid when they're talking about development, but that is something that colleges will consider. Different skills, music, theater, performing arts, athletics. If a student is very strong in, I had one student one year who was like, Miss Fleming, I'm very strong in baseball. And I was like, oh, okay, are you, and I only worked at one high school, so I'll say the high school. I was like, are you Westminster strong? Are you, City of Atlanta strong? Are you Georgia strong? And come to find out, he was drafted in the top 10 for professional sports. So he was really, really strong, right? But it is that understanding that they may be a superstar at your school, but that is wonderful for them at that moment, but that is not going to get them slotted or recruited at the caliber of school that they're looking at. Some students may be recruitable for D3, but not D1. So again, that can vary. That geographic diversity, I already mentioned athletics, first gen. A lot of colleges are looking at first gen, but not just first gen going to college, first gen to the US. There's colleges that have a undocumented students push and will fund undocumented students at 100%. And so that institutional priority is a thing that a lot of people don't talk about, but it can truly play a factor in holistic admissions. And so trying to understand, and Darren mentioned the Sweet Tea Tour and all of these other great programs, trying to get a sense of what is that institution's priority. I used to tell students, go to the college's website. Whatever they keep publicizing about news on their website is something that they're interested in. And so if you see, oh, they keep talking about they want to grow a computer science program at their school. And if your student's like, oh, I think I might be interested in computer science, I've taken the classes. Well, that might be a good match because this is a school that is growing that program versus a school that's their number one major. And so really playing around and looking at the different colleges and going on the Sweet Tea tours and going to a lot of the different programs, you will hear the institutional priorities. I used to, when I took college tours, I would ask the colleges, what is your strategic plan? What programs are you looking to grow? And I was like, okay, that means they need applicants in that area if they're looking to grow that area. And so that was something I really wrote down and kept in mind when I was thinking about fits and institutional priorities and where I was recommending students to apply. Also with holistic admissions, this is a great this is a great slide where it really shows you all the factors that play into applications. And so many times, one of my really good friends who's now a director of admissions at a phenomenal college, he was also director of admissions at another phenomenal college. He was like, Sarbeth, I can admit an entire class of 35, 36, 1600 and still have too many applicants based off of my application pool. It's like, that's not what I'm looking for. That's a part of what we consider. But if that student has a 4.0 and they decided not to take any of the rigorous classes, right? I remember going to a high school years ago when I worked at a college, and I met a young lady and I said, hey, she sounded wonderful. And I said, oh, are you taking any AP classes? She was like, no, AP classes are hard. Okay, then, which is fine. She does not have to take AP classes. But for the caliber of schools where I was representing at that time, we needed students to challenge themselves. And so I met her. I thought she was great. I recommended some colleges to her that were not necessarily where the college where I worked, because I knew that wouldn't be a great match for her. And so looking at a lot of colleges, especially when you're looking at highly selective colleges, and I just spoke to someone yesterday. I went to a public school and spoke to them. When you're looking at liberal arts colleges, liberal arts, they're looking at the 5 core disciplines. So did a student challenge themselves across the spectrum of academic areas? And if the student is like, no, I'm only interested in science and math, that's cool. But they may be putting themselves in a situation where it's harder for a liberal arts college. And so again, looking at their curriculum and what does their transcript read to? So it's not just A's and B's, but it's also, did they challenge themselves? A lot of colleges now are test optional. What I will say about test optional, it's funny because I spoke to someone and they were like, oh, but colleges for years have said additional essays are optional, but if you don't submit them, you won't get in. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Because when I say test optional at Emory and all the colleges I talked to, we really mean optional for tests. And so just recently, I saw a student who applied, and all my college friends on the call know we are deep in reading applications right now. And that student submitted not great scores and literally put in the additional information, please look more at my transcript because my test scores are not an indicator of my academic abilities. And then I'm like, well, why did you submit them? Because once I see them, I have to consider them. And so I think that's a piece that a lot of people are struggling with the holistic admissions, is that test optional piece. And as a counselor, I didn't learn this until last year because that's when a lot of colleges were going test optional. One college told me we have the policy of do no harm. So even if a score was submitted and it was low, they wouldn't consider it if it would hurt them, the student. Not all colleges are like that. Most colleges are, if you submit it, we're trusting your judgment that we're going to consider that. And so, but test scores are, should be looked at contextually as well. If a student has and I'll say, I used to work for a community-based organization as well here in Atlanta. And I remember a student scored and he was happy and it was exciting. And I also worked at a private school right here in Atlanta. And that same score at the private school, it would have been like, ooh, you need to take that again. But then I looked at his score and I looked at the profile of his high school. And he had one of the highest scores in the past 5 years at that high school. So context is important. And I told him, and I reached out to the college counselor at that high school. I was like, hey, can I write a letter for him? Because I wanted to make sure that point was emphasized, that even though in a vacuum, that score seemed okay. But looking at his environment and where he was coming from, they literally put him on the social media campaign for that school based off of his test score. And so again, all of these things are taken into account. And when you're looking at holistic applications, all of these things are taken into account. Does the student work? And so I focus on letters of recommendations because I know there were a lot of counselors that were going to be here. And so we can talk a little bit about that piece, but just the different ways of counselor letters of recommendations. And I like doing slides like this when I'm in the midst of reading, because I'm like, that's right. Because recently I just read a file where literally the teacher letter and the counselor letter were the exact same. They all talked about the students' extracurriculars. And I was like, so no one is going to talk about how they're going to be a student in college, because that's what I'm trying to see. And so making sure that there's a clear distinction between what type of letter is coming through. And making sure that there are examples, specific examples for the colleges. Like I mentioned, right now I'm reading, and almost every student, based off of GPA and test scores that they submitted in rigor, could be admissible, right? But we don't have that much space. And so I'm looking for those specific languages in the letters of recommendations where I can present to my committee and say, here's why this student is different. And if I just say, oh, Sam is smart and funny and engaging, they're going to say, so is everyone else in the pool. And so looking for those specific examples. And so here's one that I pulled up, and where it's talking about a student who's a hard worker versus a student, and giving me details on why that student is a hard worker. The student is a doer, the student was invited. And even if they were invited and it was canceled because of COVID, that's okay. They were still invited. And so those are the things that really will make a letter stand out in the pool. And as a counselor, as a teacher, that's the way that you can really help the students, because no one wants to just rain on students' parades, right? The colleges are called Office of Admissions because we want to admit students. I love reading applications and admitting students and being able to say, hey, Emory is an option for you, right? Because every student I admit, everybody's not going to come, they're going to turn it down, but I like giving them the option to turn me down. And I can only do that if I'm able to articulate why they stand out. One other thing I want to talk about is the background information, how counselors can really help frame that context and the background of this student here. What I've seen is that sometimes when students are filling out their applications, when counselors are writing letters, it is always very focused on the academic ability part, which is important. But also, is there a reason or a background story that will help me understand this student? And so this student, for example, whose mother was going through chemo, single mom, the son had to go live with relatives that he didn't really even know, they didn't really know him. And the relatives took him in because they felt obligated, but football practice, he was standing out, 2-3 hours after football practice was over. It was really hard for this individual student. This student was still taking BC calculus at the same time, right? And so I was able to give that context for the colleges to say, hey, he may not look like he's doing a lot, but let me help frame this context. And then on the other side of the coin, this student was not involved in anything at school. Just nothing. Couldn't find them to do anything at school. But they were very involved in an organization called Jack and Jill of America. And they were one of 7. That's where I could frame it, right? So that the college could understand, one of 7 students selected on the national team board representing over 40,000 people. So no, they weren't in student government. No, they weren't in debate and all of those school-related activities, but they did a lot of things outside of school. So again, helping shape that background helps with the holistic approach of the application. And then I'll end it with, and it depends on the school. Some schools are demonstrated interest. That is very important. If a school is demonstrated interest, that means, and Darren knows we were at Davidson. Davidson was a demonstrated interest school where we would pull up. If I visited your high school and did the student show up? Has the student ever been on campus? Nowadays, you can track if we're doing virtual programs, are the students signing into the virtual programs? One college, I remember a couple of years ago, we said, oh, the student is really interested. And they were like, really? Because we've emailed them 3 times and we can see that they've never opened an email from us. So I was like, oh, well, then never mind. I meant to talk about somebody else. And so some colleges that are tracking demonstrated interest, that is really important for those colleges. So your student may be the valedictorian or the salutatorian, but if they're not showing any interest, right? And now with Zoom, it's so easy to zoom in to show interest if a college is doing that. Not all colleges look at demonstrated interest. Emory, we don't. In fact, if you email me, my email signature at the bottom says, we do not track demonstrated interest, because I wanted students to know you don't have to just email me for the fun of it. I don't track it. I don't remember. And so, but some colleges that will play a role. So when we're talking about holistic, we talk about holistic admissions, we really mean that it is a gambit of things that students will can consider, that colleges consider to make that decision. So it's not just did the student score high, right? Did the student make all A's? And then also you want to also consider when colleges are considering all of these different things, making sure that the student isn't just saying, hey, I'm phoning in these applications. I saw that where students, based off of their metrics, they were well above what should have been admitted, but their essays, their supplementals, they phoned all of it in because they figured my stats are strong enough. And then when they didn't get admitted, it was like, well, you phoned in that application, and the colleges can see that. So when we're saying holistic, it is everything. And one other thing I'll say, application plan. We used to always say if a college has early decision 1, early decision 2, early action, right? The same college has all of these, and you're applying regular decision, you're telling the college you're at least 4th down, if not farther down on my list. So looking not just, I would always tell students, don't look at when the deadline is. When's the first date that you physically will be able to submit a strong application? And if that is in November, even though the deadline is not until January, if you're already applying to your ED school, you're like, but I'm pretty much finished with this other application as well. Why not hit submit at the same time? And you can actually hit submit and then wait to pay. If you're like, well, let me see if I get in my ED school before I pay that application fee. And so that's the last thing that's waiting. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And fortunately for me, I was going to say, unfortunately, there's not a rubric, because that means when I get off this call, I'll probably read another 25, 30 applications before I go to the bus stop. But that is fun because students are giving us their entire story. And once the story is there with all the different components, colleges can make a well-informed decision versus skeletal applications where it's not giving us as much as we need, and it's harder to do a holistic review on a file when it is not complete. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. But if you have students or families and you want a whole hour on holistic applications from 2 wonderful individuals, Lindsay and Ebony. Lindsay is one of my coworkers at Emory, and Ebony is a college counselor here in Atlanta, and they're doing a holistic application webinar tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please share that with your families and anybody, other coworkers who you think, oh, they couldn't come today, but this would be beneficial. Their slideshow is so much prettier and bells and whistles than mine.
All right, appreciate it, Sarbeth. Do you have any time to take questions real quick?
Absolutely.
Cool. Does anyone have any?
Read applications.
Does anybody have any questions for Sarbeth? We have one.
Yes, thank you so much. That was just a wealth of information. Oh, am I supposed to be, I'm talking. Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure. That was a wealth of information. So I have a question first and then a quick comment. I'll do the question first. Can you talk a little bit about how people make the decision about the major scholarship awards, particularly those at Emory?
Okay, how we select the major scholarship award? That is a wonderful question. And so we do have a couple of different scholarships. We have the Woodruff Scholarship, which is our top scholarship. A few years ago, Emory stopped with the nomination process. So we used to require counselors to nominate students. And then we decided that misses out on a population of students who counselors may not know or may not have the time. So any student can apply. As long as their application is by November 15th, we will consider. The students that typically will get the Woodruff are the students who have this, throughout their application, we see this quest for knowledge, this love of learning, the intellectual curiosity piece that comes through. So not just a student who is a member of organizations, but a student who has taken an organization or created an organization and has pushed it to a level where it will be sustained once they leave. Because what we saw before, and you all know, there's students who will create a club, and then when they graduate, the club is gone because there was no infrastructure really built around that club. And so a student who is taking initiative to make whatever they're doing at their school sustainable, a student who goes out beyond what's offered at their school, students who do research, internships. I had a family yesterday who asked me, well, research and internships are so expensive. They can be. But I also had a student who emailed the local school, college, and said, can I come, it was a faculty member, can I come and shadow you for 1 hour a week over the summer with your research? Because he was working at Chick-fil-A 35 hours. So he couldn't do the 35 hours like some students, but he could volunteer an hour a week. And so we're looking for those students who are able to go and say, I want to learn. I have this this desire to just keep with the knowledge. And that's what we're looking for in our Woodruff Scholars. But with that, the student has to let us know in the application. I was just reading with a coworker today, and this student had so many acronyms. I was like, I don't have time to Google all this. So I actually don't half of what I'm like, where are acronyms? Like, you gotta spell it out for me. Yes.
Well, I said I had a comment, and it was just going to be on two things. I agree with you that the test optional is something that allows students who are not heavily test oriented to show their strengths. But I wanted to let you know, it's been interesting watching test optional play out over these last 18 months. On the one hand, you have students that are perfectly willing to submit their applications without the test. Who forces them to do it, candidly, are parents. There are still too many parents who do not believe that kids can go in test optional, and they often put their child in a compromised position. I wish they would go and talk to you all directly, but that is some of the problem. And then the other thing that I was going to say, and I mean no offense to any counselor that is on this,
it's 3 o'clock.
This Zoom, but the other big issue is counselors vary significantly in terms of those who are willing to do the kind of writing that you talked about, and counselors who simply are not. And I don't mean that to say the counselors are awful. Some of it is their workload. Some of it is the student has never bothered to come in and get to know them, but whatever. And so what we often worry about are two things: the ranking mechanism, you know, where you say, is this the top 1% or whatever? And some people candidly, particularly in private schools, I tell you often, I worked in one, told straight out, don't do that ranking because it opens us to litigation. And so we just often wonder sometimes, is our student going to be at a significant disadvantage because the person just happened to get counselor that overloaded or doesn't want to write or takes that option or doesn't want to do the ranking? So I was just wondering if you could comment on how you use that information.
Yes. Well, one, I agree. I just told a group of counselors yesterday that I visited not to do the check boxes. Like, just tell you, don't do that, because it's just write the letter. If you are at a school, and it varies, because at Emory we require a counselor rec, 2 teacher recs, and we allow supplement recs. If your counselor doesn't know you well, and that's cool, there's counseling caseloads, 1 counselor to 700 students. That's where the teacher letters need to shine. That's what, like, there's opportunities if the counselor doesn't know you well, and the counselor now can really click the box now, come and have changed it. I forgot the words, but because I wanted to click it one time and my supervisor told me we couldn't. So I just put that out of my mind. I don't have the basis to know the student or what have you. That's where the teacher letters need to shine. And I think that's the benefit of students being able to select teachers. Choose a teacher that knows you well. It doesn't matter if they're a first-year teacher or have taught for 40 years. Who's the teacher who can speak about you as an individual? And that's where it can supplement. It can supplement. And that's because it's understandable that counseling loads can vary, but students can have probably 5 teachers every year. And so they have a plethora of people that they can choose from and build that connection with.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sarbeth? All right, I do have one then before I let you go, boss. So I'm a huge advocate of foreign language, probably from my time at Davidson. But can you talk about the impact of not taking foreign language? So when I moved out here, I noticed that after 8th grade or Spanish 2, students don't have to take it, which at my last jobs would severely impact their chances of getting admitted. Can you talk about that here?
Absolutely. Just talked about that today. It's a difference between high school graduation requirements and selective college admissions requirements, right? So if you want to do the bare minimum, walk across the graduation and high school graduate, congratulations, you have barbecue and do all of that stuff. But if you want to put yourself up to be in a competitive pool, you need to continue with the languages, right? Because again, it's like a student saying, what's the bare minimum I have to do to graduate versus what can I do to graduate that will put myself in a position for the next step? And so when you, like at some schools, some states, only 3 years of math is required, right? 2 years of a language is required. They're making these requirements for the large population, right? You make requirements when you have a large population, you shoot for the middle so that the people in the middle can make sure that they can be successful. When you do that, you're shooting for the largest population. But the students who want to go to the next step at the higher, more selective schools, like that student I met who said, hey, and I remember with high school, I almost said the high school, hey, are you taking AP classes? No, that's hard. That's cool. She will still graduate from high school, but she's not putting herself in a position to be accepted into highly selective institutions. And so making the choice to stop a language, it is your prerogative. You can still graduate from high school. And if that's your ultimate goal in life, which is cool, that might be where that goal stops. But if you're like, oh, but I want to go to college, then, okay, let's keep putting ourselves in a better position to get accepted into colleges and to get accepted into college with merit-based scholarships and funding. And if you want someone to fund you, no one's going to fund the bare minimum. And so, yeah.
All right, perfect. Appreciate that. All right. Any last minute questions? If not.
No, but just a comment. I just wish every college admissions counselor was as candid as you've been today. It would make a lot easier.
Anytime if you want me to come talk to you.
All right, well, appreciate it, Starbeth. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And next up, we have Dr. Ann Aguirre, speaking about ethical practices in college admissions.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. And thank you, Starbeth. I heard on a webinar this fall, and I think it might have been one of your colleagues at Emory, I think it might have been Farish, who talked about, rather than the word holistic, contextual admissions. And ask her if it was her, because I can't remember. I would love to attribute it, but I like to talk about that with my students because they don't know what holistic means, you know, but contextual admissions, they understand that their application is going to be looked at in context of their high school, right? We talk about the whole picture, and that's true, but I like to add that word contextual, and you used it in your comments too. So thanks for adding that context. And so I wanted to share, and I think Darren gave me the capacity to share a little bit about ethics in our profession. I am, along with Melissa Klein, the co-chair of the, sorry, you know how the Zoom part of the screen comes down? It was blocking my PowerPoint slides. Slide icon. So I'm the co-chair of the Admission Practices Committee on the SACAC board, and want to just take a few minutes to talk about ethical practices in our profession and kind of where we're sort of at a turning point. And this current slide shows the timeline. I'm not going to go through the whole entire timeline, but back when I was on the admission side of the desk, operating with the SPGP, you know, there were best practices on both sides of the desk to really help support the students' transition navigating from high school to college. And when NACAC transitioned in September of 2017 to the CEPP, because we love our acronyms, those were mandatory practices. And during that time, the Admission Practices Committee at the national level, as well as those at the affiliate level, like at SACAC and the other regional ACAC organizations, we're in a role of compliance. If somebody, a member, identified an institution or another member that was not abiding by these mandatory practices, they could report that to be investigated by the Admissions Practice Committee, and sanctions could be issued. Long story short, an antitrust allegation through the Department of Justice led to a consent decree where we had a moratorium on all those compliance pieces, and NACAC did some research and developed and vetted and further vetted and shared with membership what came to be the guide for ethics in college admission practices. And that is the guide that we are working on today, and I've put the link in the chat box so you can get to more specifics. For those of you familiar with the CEPP or the SPGP from previous, the guide is same in that it is still preserving, trying to serve the best interest of students. Most of the mandatory best practices are still now included as recommended best practices, including the earliest deadlines of October 15th for earliest application deadline and the May 1 national reply date. But the guide is different in that all of these provisions are recommended best practices, which means that there are no longer sanctions for non-compliance. So NACAC and the affiliate AP committees are not in a position to enforce compliance. We can certainly still be available to talk with individuals and recommend some ways to address issues when they come up. And I'll even show you something new on the SACAC website that you might not have seen yet. Some of the recommended practices are a little bit less specific than mandatory practices. And along with NACAC's updating core values, which you've probably seen that in some of the NACAC resources, there are links to resources that will support these recommended best practices. And this quote I do want to actually read because it comes from the ad hoc committee report on leadership and college admission, but I think it really synthesizes where we are in our profession with regard to how we are perceiving and making folks aware of ethical behavior practices in college admission. So the Department of Justice investigation into NACAC's Code of Ethics on restraint of trade grounds has resulted in an irreversible change in direction for NACAC, one that seems destined to move us beyond a role in which we self-regulate to one in which we must advocate and rely on our core values to represent what is good and noble in higher education admission, while also naming what is wrong and detrimental. And what that means is everyone on this call, everyone that we work with on both sides of the desk, we are all now in a position of advocacy and education to promote best practices of and ethical practices in college admissions. So this QR code takes you to NACAC's website where the guide to ethical practices in college admissions is available. But before I open it up to any questions or comments, I want to share my screen again and go to the SACAC webpage to show you something that we have just gotten live on SACAC's website, and you'll be receiving more communications to draw your attention to it. But if you go to the SACAC website at admissions practices, right, you will see a blurb that's been on there for a while, but then this second paragraph, in order to empower individuals to apply and advocate for ethical practices in college admission, NACAC created a series of dilemmas to use as educational tools. And let me say that SACAC was a big help in NACAC creating these dilemmas. So we submitted a lot of dilemmas that came from our members and from our AP committee. So big shout out to SACAC for that. And what NACAC did, and so what I'm about to show you is us translating on the SACAC website from NACAC, 18 different dilemmas with a scenario of the dilemma, some discussion topics, possible approaches to that situation, and links to where it is can be found in the guide. So this page, this ethical dilemmas in college admissions page, there are some of these dilemmas that are centered around confidentiality, others around truthfulness and transparency, others around admission dates and deadlines, and then lastly, some on early decision. And I'm just going to pick this one on truthfulness and transparency to show you as an example about the college essay authenticity question, because I'm sure none of you have ever come up on that, right? So the dilemma is that, Millie Vanilli has, been receiving C's in their English class, but now she's got this beautiful essay. What do you do? Well, how do you approach this with Millie? Do you get the parents involved? Do you reach out to the teacher? If you're an admission on the college side of the desk, and there's a disconnect between the essay and the grades in high school English on the transcript, what's your next step? And here's some possible approaches. Here's where it is in the guide. Section 1B talks about we are responsible for educating students and families that it's unethical to submit false, plagiarized, and fraudulent statements on the applications or other documents. So each of these dilemmas has these 4 pieces. And so what we're really hoping is that these can be used for discussion, for teaching, for sharing with students, with families, with counselors, things about our profession, so we can improve best practices with regard to ethics. So with that said, I am happy to answer any questions, listen to any comments about the guide, about ethical dilemmas in your work. Jacqueline's you're laughing, so I can't wait.
I just got to figure out where to start. I'm going to comment on one thing first, specifically about the essay thing, but then I'm going to talk about agents. I am a member of SACAC because I'm in the Mid-Atlantic area, so a lot of my students do apply to Southern colleges. So I've joined a lot of regional SACACs. And I can tell you where I am in the Mid-Atlantic, agents are running rampant. And I think the distinction that I would make is that there's a difference between an agent a community-based counselor, and even an IEC. I mean, most reputable IECs have taken coursework, or they are part of either IECA or HECA, who are also part of NACAC, and who also use your case studies and everything for counselors to join. But the agency component, particularly for international students, is really rampant in our area. They tell parents all kinds of things. They claim they can guarantee admission. They tell them to do things that are, especially the athletes, that are just outright wrong. So I don't really know how we can address that, because candidly, and it's interesting to have Sarbeth hopefully still in the conversation, because far too many colleges don't make the distinction between an independent counselor or CBO and an agent. An agent is simply that, a person who takes money to guarantee to a person that they can deliver a certain reward to them. And I think where the biggest dilemma, the biggest way in which to address them is going to have to be colleges making the decision as to whether they're going to do that. I don't want to stereotype, but obviously they are very strong in international markets, but they are not absent from the United States either. Now I was going to talk about two case studies. One is related to your essay. Now, I think you gave excellent advice, because I had a situation where a student wrote a very nice essay, and it had an excellent interview, well, I shouldn't say interview, but a visit with a counselor. And the mother, who's hell-bent on him getting into one of the Ivies, literally rewrote his application. And as soon as I saw it, I called her and I said, I'm just going to tell this to you straight. Kids don't use words like corporatize. I said, kids don't organize their resume. I said, colleges candidly don't even necessarily want a resume that's organized with what is your goals, what is your professional thing, all this kind of stuff. I said, candidly, the essay that you wrote is dry, it's boring, and his voice is gone. So she would not change it. So the result, which actually ended up not being tragic, is that he did not get into Yale, where she was trying to get him to. But the interesting thing is that before she intervened, he had already sent his application to the University of Miami, his first choice, and he got into the University of Miami. So there was a wonderful ending to that horrible ethical dilemma, but she did that. Now, the only challenge that I see is, I go back to your case about the C student. There could arise a situation that I encountered where a student was taking an English class from a teacher who was supposed to be teaching rhetorical argument for AP language and composition. The school eventually found out that this teacher was terrible, and the way she was trying to explain, what a claim is and all this kind of stuff was simply confusing students. And so you could get a C or a bad grade in her class, but the student actually wrote an essay that was very creative, and it was good. So I just want to caution that sometimes the grade, may need to be looked into, because it can reflect the teacher, it can reflect the student's reaction to the teacher, but not necessarily the student's ability to write. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you for all of those comments, Jacqueline. When I was on the college side of the desk, the use of international agents was just booming. And so I've been a part of those conversations, and even I think one of the biggest, there's the ethics piece, right? And Varsity Blues is now publicized ethics for everybody within our profession, sort of like aired our dirty laundry nationally. But sometimes, you just have internal little struggles. And, I have a new colleague here that, just got thrown into having a caseload, a small caseload of seniors to work with. And we were with a college rep, and the counselor went around and said, okay, is this school your top choice? Is this school your top choice? Is this school your top choice? And, there's a case study. I could have selected that case study, because literally that happened to me, where I was listening to someone ask about what a student's top choice was in front of the rep. And so, right. So that's provided an opportunity for me to address that, but explain why it's not appropriate, right? And so for me, it's one thing to say, hey, you don't do that, but it's another thing to take the time to explain why, right? And so some parents may be receptive to the fact that, hey, if you don't let your child write the essay now, they're not going to learn how to write essays and be successful when they're in college, right? I realize some parents may not care, but trying to explain the why behind these best practices, I feel like that's my best armor, right? But it is, Melissa and I have been approached by some folks of, well, hey, this is happening. Can you not fix this, right? And we're trying to get to all of the state and area meetings because our profession is in a different place. We used to have an area to say, hey, here's something wrong. Let's take it to the National AP Committee. Let's have them address it, investigate, and deal with it, and see, is the girl getting C's? Did she or did she not write this essay, right? I mean, that's obviously they wouldn't have handled something that serious, but now we're no longer able to do that. And if you have questions offline, I'm happy to explain the whys about that. But now we are all empowered. And I think those of us on this call are ones that are engaged with the profession. We know what's going on, but it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that our fellow college counseling professionals know that we are all empowered to call out what is wrong and to highlight what is best practice and what is right. And that's just a mental shift.
It is. No, it is.
Any other questions, comments?
If not, thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And don't hesitate to contact admission practices at sacac.org if you have any questions.
All right, perfect. Thank you so.
You're on mute, Darren.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gure. All right, so really appreciate your presentation, but I also put all of those links in the chat that I said I was going to earlier. So everything from our mini Camp College previous recordings to the application for the Rising Awards to the SACAC volunteer sign up is now in the chat. I do have one more slide that I want to get up, but before I do, our last upcoming events for 2021, I know this year kind of flew by. We do have 2 more mini camp colleges left. Like Sarbeth said, we have one tomorrow at 6:00 p.m. And that is going to be on holistic admission. So more in-depth version of what Sarbeth gave us today. Tuesday, December 15th, we have one on financial aid. And that's going to cover the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and different scholarships. And second semester, the only one on the book right now is January 11th at 6 p.m. And that's on the organization and the college planning process. And that's for students and adults. So if you can, get your students and your parents to sign on. If you want to hop on for professional development, please do so. The link's in the chat. And if you have different ideas for more camps for next year or next semester, definitely go online and fill out an application to get your idea out there. If anyone else has any ideas they want to share or upcoming events that they want to get out. If not, I'm going to share one more screen because it is so pretty. But here is our flyer for the SACAC 2022 annual conference, April 3rd through 5th. Before I let you guys go, I do want to thank everyone from hopping on, Dr. Flowers, Dr. Gure, Sarbeth, as well as all of you all for taking time out of your schedules to hop on. And a special shout out to both Catherine and Corey for all the behind the scenes work they did to make this really possible, from communications to putting me through training and everything. So thank you guys for all your work behind the scenes on that one. Did either one of you guys want to say a few words before I let you go?
Darren, you're the person who deserves all the credit here. Seriously, Darren, you put together an amazing state meeting with some phenomenal speakers, and Corey and I have already, Darren has shared his PowerPoint with us, and we have already put it in the folder of how to do a good state meeting 101 for all of the other states. So seriously, thank you so much, Darren, for stepping in and for giving your time to SACAC and for doing some really great work. So we appreciate you. We're blessed and honored to have you. The state of Arkansas should be proud. You're a good leader.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all you guys. All right. Well, if nothing else, you guys are going to get about 35 minutes back of your time. So I hope you, I'm not sure if you're going to read apps like Sarah Beth, but enjoy the time you get back, guys. And I hope to see you all soon. All right. Take care.